said, well, doc, look, I don't want to make you mad, but I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. And so I told him what I was doing. I said, I'm doing exactly the opposite of what you told me to do. Guess what? I'm not restricting anything. I've added salt back in there because my body needs it. I'm eating meat. Okay, so I come home. Well, that wasn't the answer, so I wait another week or so and I blew up another 10 to 15 pounds in that short period of time. So I went to another hospital, went in, and they admitted me in and said, what do you want us to do? I said, find out what's wrong. They said, okay, so we need to do a biopsy on your kidney. Sure, let's do it. So February of 23, they did a biopsy and they diagnosed me with FSGS, which is focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, which is scarring of the kidney, where one of the doctors explained it like a spaghetti strainer. It has all the holes in it and, normal amount of liquid coming out as you strain your spaghetti. Well, mine is just wide open. There's just one big hole. So everything was dumping out in my urine, protein, everything was going out of my urine. Even my cholesterol went crazy. Hyperlipidemia, my total cholesterol was 1,000. The triglycerides were like 490. And they're trying to shove all these drugs down my throat, statins and this and that and blah, 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 which, I'd already heard about that stuff and what it does to deplete the cholesterol that your brain needs. So I wasn't on board with taking any of that. But they did give me steroids to start with because they said, hey, there's no cure for what you have. You're going to wind up on dialysis and need a kidney transplant. I'm like, great. That's not what I want to hear.
Right.
So I took 60 milligrams of steroids for probably 6 months, maybe. That just messed me up even worse. Couldn't sleep, still couldn't eat. I'm still gaining fluid now. I'm over 285. That's 35 pounds of fluid, and nobody's doing anything. So I go to another kidney doctor, nephrologist, and by the time I get to him, I'm at about 300 pounds, miserable. He almost threw a bunch of paperwork, says it's complicated. I said, you think? But he never even physically examined me and says, go home and monitor your weight for 2 more weeks.
Quick interruption. BeastMode Soap sent me this soap, 100% beef tallow, free to try. This is certified grass-fed tallow, never vegan, made in the USA, natural essential oils. We got forest ash, paleo pine. We're in the pine forest. The forest ash is my favorite. I've been using it for a while now. They sent this to me for free, but I liked it so much I agreed to do a paid partnership with them because I believe people need to know what they're putting on their body. And the soap that I had at home is full of chemicals, detergents. Seriously, after I use this soap, my skin feels so soft and so incredible. What you put on your skin ends up in your bloodstream. And I only want to put good things in my body and on my body. And this, there couldn't be much better. This is 100% beef tallow. Learn more at BeastModeSoap.com.
I'm like, what do you think I've been doing for the last 6 months or however long it's been, right? So I go home, that didn't last. I wind up back in the hospital. So by the time I get there, I'm at 307. So I gained 57 pounds of fluid in a short period of time. So the first visit, I passed about 55 pounds of fluid in a week, in 7 days. They were giving me albumin and Bumax through an IV drip. And every 12 hours, so what I was doing for 7 days, 24 hours a day. Right. So I come home after that 55 pounds and that still wasn't enough. I was still uncomfortable, couldn't eat, miserable, couldn't breathe that good. So I went back and they did the same routine again. And I wound up getting 77 pounds of fluid removed in 2 different hospital visits.
Wow.
So I went from 307 to 230. I'm like, that's crazy that they let me blow up to that big before they would even do anything. Nobody believed me. They just blow you off, send you out the door, whatever. So now, I come home from that and I don't like any of the doctors and I'm trying to deal with them the best I can. I run a few of them off, because they weren't looking out for my best interest and I didn't know what to do, but I knew they wanted me to take cyclosporin, was one of the drugs, to suppress my immune system. They kept saying, hey, we need to suppress your immune system. Your body is attacking itself. I'm like, okay. So I took that for like 2 weeks and it put me in the hospital. My GFR went down to 18%. I'm like, wow, here we are, knocking on death's door. And so I stopped that medication and it came back up a little bit. And so right then I knew I wasn't going to take it because it causes cancer. It causes all kinds of other issues. And I'm like, why, if I want to be on dialysis, do I want to complicate things and have cancer also, and just be miserable? I said, if I'm going to wind up on dialysis, God's in control of this whole situation. So I'm not going to take these drugs. I might not have the answer, but I don't think what you're giving me is the answer. So this rocked on from 23 to last year. I have a good friend of mine. His name is Mark, and he's an RN. Not that he's an expert, but he was the one that was guiding me through keto, ketovore, and carnivore. He's like, "What do you have to lose at this point?" I said, "Nothing. I don't have anything to lose." So January of this year, me and my wife both decided to, start keto. And we eased into it initially, because we still ate fruit and we still ate nuts, so we wouldn't have a real, as you would say, the flu, the crash, as your body transitioned from burning carbs to burning fat. So we did that for the first month. And then we cut out the fruit and we cut out the nuts and got serious about what we were doing. And we included some veggies that, Dr. Berry had talked about, some cabbage and asparagus and broccoli and a few other things. And we cooked them in bacon, grease, and butter, and that's what we ate for the next couple of months. And then I watched some videos of some other doctors. Dr. Boz was one. And she was like, hey, you need to do this carnivore to spike up your ketones, and I'm like, hey, well, let's try it, so, and I have a meter, where I can check my blood, and I was checking my ketones, and so, I was like 0.7, 0.8, somewhere around in there, and then I did this carnivore thing for 3 days, and it really didn't move that much. I'm like, that's not the results that she's talking about, so I extended it. I was doing okay, so I just kept going with it, right? And so in about 9 or 10 days, I lost 9 pounds doing carnivore. Right then, I'm like, hey, my ketones spiked up to like 1.5 from where they were at. I said, I know I'm doing the right thing now. This is where I need to be. My energy started getting better. Everything started getting better, So along the way, I'm doing blood work also, So the first blood work I had, the last blood work I had in December of 2024 showed my GFR at 20%. Everything's looking bad. I'm 5% away from dialysis, right? And so then I had the next blood work done in February of this year. That one showed an improvement of 10 points. It went from 20 to 30. Bam, just like that. And I wasn't even in carnivore then. I was still in the beginning of the keto. I hadn't gone over and swapped over at that point, but I had cut out everything that was processed, all potatoes and starch, everything, so even that gave me an improvement right off the bat. But then when I swapped to carnivore, man, it started really moving. So the next month I went, my GFR was 37. I'm like, holy crap, man, I feel great. I feel better compared to where I was at, I go a month later, it was at 45. I'm like, holy, thank you. 45%, I'm coming back to life. I told my wife, it's like I was buried in the ground. And my finger was sticking up, and somebody finally saw it, and it kicked all the dirt off of me, and I came back. What an amazing turnaround in such a short period of time. And I never told my kidney doctor exactly what I was doing. When I saw him in February, he saw that improvement, There was a little bit of weight loss there, but I had just started. There was only like 8 pounds, so he didn't pick up on it. And he's like, oh, well, God gave you a break today. I said, yeah, I would say so. And what are you doing? He's like, I said, well, I'm just drinking lemonade, spoon feed him, whatever, right? He's the one that has a degree. I'm just a lay person. I don't know anything, right? And so finally, this last visit in April, when I went and saw him, and he looked at my GFR, and he looked at my everything, even my white blood cell count, where they said my body was attacking itself. When I was on steroids, it was over 22,000. And when I came off the steroids, it was down to 12.5, but I never would get any lower. Well, once I started carnivore, boom, it went to 11, it went to 10, and the last blood work, it was down to 8,500. The lowest I've seen in probably 10 years. So I have all this information, and the doc comes in the room and he says, I guess you've seen this already. And I'm like, sure, I've seen it already. I said, what do you think? And he's like, I don't know. What are you doing? I said, well, do you see any weight loss there or anything? What do you see? And he's looking at it. They can't even keep those records straight. He had me listed at 370 pounds. He said, looks like to me you've lost over 100 pounds. And I said, no, that's not right. Well, really, I've lost 45 pounds since January is what I've lost. And so he didn't. That just shows you how they don't really pay attention, to your chart or to your health or nothing. They just want to write something on a piece of paper and send you on out the door. So anyway, he looks at us and said, Doc, look, I don't want to make you mad, but I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. And so I told him what I was doing. I said, I'm doing exactly the opposite of what you told me to do. You told me to restrict my salt and to restrict my protein and to restrict my meat, restrict my fluid, restrict this, restrict that. And guess what? I'm not restricting anything. I've added salt back in there because my body needs it. I'm eating meat, and eggs, and that's pretty much all I eat. And, the fluid, I drink all of them, and I'm drinking water and sweet tea, and, that's pretty much what I drink. And so all the restrictions you had on me are gone. And some of the medication that you gave me is gone also. The diuretics that I was taking to keep the fluid off, they quit working. They weren't even working anymore. So, I was in a tough spot, trying to figure out what to do. And thankfully, my friend, kept pushing me, hey, you need to do this. You need to do this. Watch this. This stuff is working. And he himself lost 60 pounds and turned his liver enzymes around doing carnivore. And he's been doing it for a couple of years. So it wasn't like it was just something he was telling me to do. He was doing it himself, so I could see the results from him. And so the doctor looks at everything and he's like, it's amazing. It's a major improvement, a major turnaround. I said, now what are you going to do with this information that you have? I said, now you have access to all these patients that are sick, just like I am. They might not have exactly the same thing, but they're close, chronic kidney disease and all kinds of other issues, nephrotic syndrome, where, he's like, well, yeah, I guess I can tell them about what it's done for you. And I said, well, what about having a little group chat at this clinic right here where you bring in some of your kidney patients and bring in different speakers? And you know what he said? That's not politically correct. I said, oh, exactly. You can't make any money off of it. And it's going to show everybody that carnivore will keep people from coming to your clinic. So, of course, you're not on board with that. Right. It's crazy that, he has access to all these people and all this information, and he won't even share it with anybody, but that's on him. And, he said, you know what? I don't need to see you anymore. He said, I'm releasing you as a patient. And I said, really? He's like, yeah. I said, well, I still want to do blood work, every month and keep up with it or whatever. And he said, well, I really don't need to see you. I said, but what about the blood work? And he's like, okay, yeah, we can keep that going. He said, I'll put the next orders in. And we discussed what that was going to be and agreed on it. And he said, if you want any blood work after that, just call the office. And so he was cooperative, once he found out what I was doing and he saw the transformation in me, where this man told me and told my wife that when I didn't know where I was at or I couldn't breathe, then they would do something. That was what he told me last year, And the thing that all I had to do was change what I put in his mouth, and use the brain that God gave me and use the body that he made to try to heal myself. And look at what it's doing. It might not come back to 100%. We don't know. But the fact that it come to almost half in that quick period of time is an amazing turnaround.